say that there's this thing called the tidal force. Have you ever heard about the tidal force? Tides go up and down on the edge of the ocean twice a day. Heard about this one? Right? Now, I have a question for you. Does that only happen in the ocean?
What happens in big lakes?
And in your brain.
I would expect that it happens in the land as well. My understanding is that the moon is actually literally pulling the water up. And my understanding is that if you've got water in your water table and you don't have a tightly compacted plow pan or area in your subsoil which is too tight, then water will literally move up and down in the subsoil twice a day to keep your plants watered. So for me, that's probably how nature does it. And nature, of course, uses perennials and deeper rooted plants. And if you're growing things like annuals, which I think most of you here probably are, you need to have a really good system for that to function. If you do have a plow pan where this water can't percolate up and down because the soil is too tight, if you're living on a sand dune, then you have to use other modes to maintain hydration. But for me, this is one of the things that I consider to be a really big limiting factor. I tell people, if you can't maintain hydration, don't waste your money on minerals. If there's no water in your soil, it doesn't matter what minerals are there because the soil life's dead and the system can't work. So a strategy, a system for maintaining hydration, I think is really, really important. On my annual cropping land, I use drip tape, which is a pretty simple technology developed by the Israelis in the Negev desert to grow crops with the least amount of water possible. It's very passive. Mine is a gravity-operated system. Drip tape costs about $130 or $40 for a mile and a half of drip tape. Literally 7,500 feet is about $130. So you can get a lot of drip tape for not much money. I lay it down in my 4-foot beds. I have 3 lines of drip tape in a 4-foot bed because I like to keep the entire soil profile moist. I see a lot of farmers, they have their black plastic beds they put the tomatoes into. Anybody seen this? And they got 1 line of drip tape right underneath the tomato plant and this black plastic bed, and then they got a place where they got the tractor, which just kept tilled so we don't have any weeds. And basically you've got 1 line of drip tape functionally every 10 feet or 12 feet. And in a hot summer like we had this year, it's powder everywhere. And my experience is when the plants, which are getting big, are unable to reach out and be fed from the soil at that size, right? As above, so below. You got a 5-foot tall plant reaching out 3 feet. You'd want to have a 5-foot plant reaching out 3 feet, but you've only got 1 line of drip, then basically that plant is out of balance. It can't feed itself because it doesn't have a full spectrum of moisture to feed the soil life to be able to be fed. Does that make sense? I don't think I'm being very eloquent, but maintaining hydration I think is really massively important. There's strategies in the permaculture community of things like, we talk about keyline plowing, where you can look at the lay of the land. I have done this on my land. I've identified where the wet spots are, ideally the wet spots that are higher on the land, and dug them out and made a series of ponds and water catchment systems so I can basically have lots of water stockpiled high in the land that can be basically slowly percolating down through the fields. So depending on your scale, your scope, if you've got a backyard or what the lay of the land is, there's different strategies for doing it. We can go into that in greater detail, but maintaining hydration is, I think, very, very important.
Is there a term for that now?
What?
We were just talking about?
Keyline is probably a pretty good one. Keyline, K-E-Y. I think it was Alan Yeomans.
P.A. Yeomans.
P.A. Yeomans.
There's a bunch of free literature online.
Yeah, you can download it. But it's basically looking at the lay of the land and seeing where the water is, and then you can basically take a little shank, and you just pull it through the soil, and by cracking a hole, you look at the lay of the land, and you basically make a little slice in the ground that'll help the water flow. And you can get water to effectively flow uphill. If you've got a peak and a valley, but uphill in the valley you got water, then you can do a key line so that the water comes straight across to the peak of the hill. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I'm not drawing it very well, but You can do some really, really interesting things with water. And I think it's one of those big systemic things to be identifying. And anyway, these are broad strokes, but these are the major components. You don't have water, you're in serious trouble. Somebody's got chickens or cats or dogs or children, right? Don't feed them, don't water them for a couple days and see what happens. People who have gardens, don't water their gardens because they don't get around to it. You shouldn't be surprised. I just have to say, when the leaves of a plant are looking nice and shiny, you know that look? That like iridescent sheen. It's oftentimes easily gotten on brassicas, broccoli and cabbage, but winter squash can look nice and shiny, and lots of tomatoes can look nice and shiny. What I've noticed many times is that you get these plants are looking really good, coming out of June into July, and then we'll have a period of hot and dry that sets in for a week or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, depending on the year. And about a week into it, you start to see those leaves not look so shiny anymore. See that happen? And then they go from not shiny to really not very green anymore, and then they start to see little holes or discolorations or infestations. My understanding is that shiny leaf is what causes that leaf to be shiny is basically a surfeit of energy. That plant, when it's being fed well, when it's got everything it needs, stores its extra nutrition in the form of fat. People have heard about this, right? Eat too much, you get plenty to eat, and you get a little fat, right? Animals store their extra energy in the form of fat. Plants store their extra energy in the form of fat. It's the waxy cuticle on the leaf surface is fat. And the shinier the leaf is, the more fat and happy the plant is. And so when you start to see that shiny leaf dissipate, that means that the plant is no longer being fed, and so it's eating up its fat reserve. If you've seen a cow or any other kind of animal, what didn't get fed for a while, lose its color, its coat went from shiny to dull, and then you start to see its ribs. That's exactly what you're seeing in your plant when it goes from a shiny leaf to a dull leaf, etc. So that is, categorically happens in areas where people don't maintain hydration and drought. You can just see it every single year.